I was struck today, listening to the debate in Parliament, by hearing Theresa May speak quite openly, without any qualification, about the negotiations she'd just been having and the draft agreement that she's just concluded with the European Union Commission. Not with Europe, not with Barnier, not with the representatives of the Council of Europe, but with the European Union Commission. And that actually illustrates, I think, it illustrates exactly where power really lies in the European Union. It doesn't lie with the elected heads of state collectively. It certainly doesn't lie with possibly the most powerless parliament on the planet, the European Parliament. It lies with the unelected and, in practice, largely unaccountable European Commission. And those of you who, like me, include in their bedtime reading the Treaty on the European Union and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, you will know that the enormous powers of the Commission are set out there in black and white, in a way that certainly doesn't exist as far as the civil service in Britain is concerned, which doesn't have anything like the power, not least, for example, the power to initiate legislation that the European Commission has and which the European Parliament doesn't have. Anyway, what we've seen is an agreement now drawn up, or a draft agreement, that was always going to happen. Because the European Commission did what it always does. It negotiated while representing the common interests of the big monopoly capitalisms of Western Europe, and in particular French and German, and to a lesser extent Italian monopoly capital. The British Tory government did what Tory governments always do. It represented the common interests of monopoly capital in Britain. And between all of those, they have common interests. The common interests of Western European monopoly capital, of imperialism. And so there was always the likelihood that they would reach an agreement, because those common interests exist and they are very powerful, and they will override everything. They'll override our democratic vote in 2016 if we allow it. What's the alternative to this draft agreement that we now have in front of us? Well, there is an agreement that's further to the right in many respects. There's the real Brexit that is desired by the Tory right, or a large section of the Tory right, and UKIP. But they don't speak for the British ruling class. Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson do not speak for the CBI, or the Institute of Directors, or the City of London, or the big merchant banks that bankrolled the Remain campaign. In that respect, from the viewpoint of class politics, they're quite marginal. British big business has always been in favour of EU membership. It was in favour of Remain, and when Theresa May and Hammond had to set up their Business Advisory Council, they had their orders. If you can't reverse Brexit, the leaders of British industry and banking told them, if you can't reverse Brexit altogether, then you must reach a bogus Brexit that gives the appearance that we're leaving the European Union, whilst continuing to tie Britain to the rules of the single market and the customs union, which are rules designed to serve the interests of big business. The Business Advisory Council knows that, the CBI know it, the Institute of Directors know it, the city banks know it, and so does the European Commission, and it reminded the Tory negotiators of that only a couple of months ago. The reports were there, not just in the Daily Mail and the Daily Express, but in the Financial Times, warning that unless we reach some kind of agreement that serves the common interests of monopoly capital, you could have a left Labour government that will carry out policies that won't be in the interest of either British big business or European big business. It's all spelled out for us. For the life of me, I can't understand why pro-EU elements in the Labour movement don't know this. Perhaps they ought to read the Financial Times every day alongside their Morning Star, as I do. But yeah, we've also got the pro-EU and agnostic elements in our movement, in the Labour movement, many of them on the left, support a whole range of progressive policies, but they seem to think that Jacob Rees-Mogg and people like this are the real class enemy. Are the real class enemy. And not only are they the real class enemy, without the protection of the European Union, they'll give us one hell of a beating. As if, firstly, as if they do represent the ruling class, which they most certainly don't on this question, and secondly, as if the Labour movement is completely powerless when it comes to facing the possibility of a government led by Michael Gove and Boris Johnson. All those rights that we fought for, never given to us by the European Commission, by the way, all those rights that we fought for, apparently we're utterly incapable of hanging on to and defending. Well, comrades, I don't believe in flying the white flag. I think we've got to be flying the red flag. And as far as the role of the European Union when it comes to protecting our rights, can you tell me which one of the 12 or 13 anti-trade union laws that we've had in Britain since 1979, can you tell me which one of them, even, was blocked by the European Union? None. None. And of all the racist, nationality and immigration laws that we've had almost annually, even under the new Labour government, how many of those have ever been blocked or challenged by the European Union? None. The European Union has never protected workers' rights and people's rights in Britain, and it's not going to start now. The question has been raised, and there are those, and they're comrades of ours. We campaign alongside them on many questions, but there are those who argue reform and remain. And it's not true to say the EU is not capable of reforming. We've had plenty of reforms since the 1970s, when the left had a much clearer understanding of the class politics involved in the European Union question. We've had the single European market, we've had all the anti-trade union and anti-worker judgments of the European Court of Justice, we've had the Amsterdam Monetarist Treaty, we've had the formation of the European Central Bank, we've had the entrenchment of the powers of the Commission and the Bank in the Constitutional Treaty. We've had the punishment beatings meted out by the Troika. We've had Fortress Europe constructed, where all those countries with liberal immigration laws have been compelled to raise the barriers ever higher. We've had the common foreign and defence policy, and now we have alignment with NATO. Spelled out in Protocol 10, I told you it was my bedtime reading, spelled out in Protocol 10 of the Treaty on the European Union, that the European Union's common foreign and defence policy supports NATO, is in alignment with NATO, and requires EU members to continually raise its armament spending. It's there in black and white. So the idea that this kind of European Union is going to be reformed, because within a very short space of time, we're going to be able to elect left-of-centre governments in 10 or 15 or 20 member states, I'm afraid is a complete fantasy. And if the Labour Party indulges in this fantasy, and hopefully with John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn at the helm it won't, there's the danger it will go the same way as just about every pro-EU social democratic party has gone in Europe. Their votes have collapsed in France, in Spain, in Germany, in Cyprus, in Greece, in Italy. If you want to see the leaders of the old Italian Socialist Party, you'd better look up the prison visiting hours. They've all collapsed. They've all collapsed because they were pro-EU, and therefore they followed the neoliberal rules, the austerity policies, and so on. So that's why, comrades, and I'll finish on this, that's why we need mass campaigning. We need a campaign. We need to use these next couple of months to build a campaign for a people's Brexit. Cooperation, yes. Greater cooperation on many questions with European countries, yes. But not at the price of being bound by the rules of the single market and the customs union. Not at the price of £39 billion that we could spend elsewhere. And not at the price of those policies that an incoming Labour government would not be able to enact if we continue to be bound by these rules. I'll finish on one advertisement, if I may, Chair. In this pamphlet, I've spelt out 16 specific pledges in Labour's last election manifesto, 16 specific pledges, and I've identified the specific provisions of each EU treaty and the specific directives that would prohibit a Labour government carrying out those policies. And so, if we want a government of the left, and we will have to fight to get that, if we want a government of the left, elected on a left platform, and we want those policies to be implemented, comrades, we have an enormous amount of work to do over the next couple of months to try and influence the present and the future shape of any future agreement with the European Union.